Hi, this is Stephen Andrews, Outlaw Bookseller, and I thought it was time now, as the album's been out for a week, to reflect on sort of first thoughts on listening to Cult Leader Tactics and what I think about it so far. And I've been enjoying it, and it's quite an unusual experience for me to buy an album which is in the charts, an album that gets into the charts, because alongside other people not supposed to be buying it on the sort of first day and what have you. And I did the unboxing last week of the clear vinyl edition, and I got the CD at the same time. And I like to give it a few plays to let things sink in. At the same time, I try and avoid reviews and things because I want to have my own ideas. So I thought we'd have a little chat about it, and I thought I'd give you sort of my feelings initially about the album. And of course, I don't have the box set version with a 5.1 DVD. I am thinking about it, and I know that Paul has written a text for the book, and which is a parody of self-help manuals. And as I said in my other video, I work as a bookseller. I have done for nearly 40 years, and I sell self-help books as part of my everyday job. I sell all sorts of books, that's just one part of it. So I'm particularly attuned to this as a concept, and I think it's a great idea, and that the title fits in. So just looking over it track by track really, and Cult Leader Tactics, of course, the opening cut, you think obviously of what we know that's been said about the record, about how it's about the sort of dirty tricks in the music industry and what you need. But of course it applies to all of life. And reading the lyrics, you know, Paul sings about climbing the greasy ladder, which is a cliche, but you know, it's something we all recognize. And cliches are important because of course they have the grain of truth in them. They're common experience that we have. And you know, he sort of speaks about, with great eloquence, as his lyrics, which is what I really love about Paul's work. The lyrics are just so strong, and he sort of writes about, he'll illustrate with graphics, and of course graphic design is a big part of any album. There's also graphic design in this record. I'll rearrange a standard passage, and that's sort of a postmodern thing where you take something and reconfigure it. That's a very clever thing, and I think, you know, Paul's done that in his work from right from near the beginning. If you look at Tax Loss, for example, which has musical affinities with sort of certain Beatles things, and obviously it's reference to Taxman and the fact that Mansun were from the Liverpool area, you know, Chester, Buckley, what have you. And, you know, it is quite interesting to reflect on that, the way that they took the shadow of the Fab Four, who are a band who I personally feel, I'm not a huge Beatles fan. I think they're overrated. I think they're historically important, but I don't particularly like their music or like their voices. But it is that clever usage of reconfiguring things. You know, the Tax Loss lovers from Liverpool, the truth be told, all that. And you know, that is referred to in Cult Leader Tactics. As I think, you know, the whole idea of in Tax Loss about, you know, we think you are stupid, our assets are fluid. You know, it relates conceptually to this, and this is why I think Paul is such a good songwriter. There's a bigger picture, there are subtle messages, and you know, I can only think that this comes from his own way of thinking and his influence of people like Devoto from Magazine, you know, who's a very arch, very thoughtful, very literate songwriter, and that seems to me a key part of this. And monetize these classics. I mean, monetize is such a contemporary word, isn't it? I mean, it's been around a long time, but we all know what it means now. Monetizing YouTube, for example, is something I'd like to do. You know, I'm not going to make any bones about it. And the until your streaming farm just crashes, the idea that he's getting so many plays, that this cult leader in music is getting so many plays, that, you know, all those sort of mainframes are there and they collapse. And Paul isn't essentially talking about himself here. There's a sort of irony where he is, but he's just talking generally about what you have to do in the music industry or in life to survive, you know. And I've read Machiavelli, and you know, the whole sort of backstabbing prince thing is summed up really amazingly well in Cult Leader Tactics, and you know, with a certain tongue in the cheek and edginess, which is great. So I love that, and the music's fantastic. That sort of spidery guitar line at the beginning is just, you know, classic Draper, isn't it, really? Internationale, that's an interesting one, because, you know, I don't really always like things which are topical and political, because of course you know that they pass, but let's face it, I mean, if anybody needs a slamming, it's Johnson and Trump, isn't it? And you can just see through them in the way that you can see through this clear vinyl edition of Cult Leader Tactics. They're just so transparent, and yet they get away with it. Trump obviously is down now, but Johnson is just getting away with it. And Paul has come out on Facebook and said how disgraceful it is, and it's absolutely right. So it's quite interesting. And I mentioned that Internationale reminds me of the old left-wing Labour Party song, which was called The International, We'll Keep the Red Flag Flying Here, and what have you. And even sort of writers like Thomas Piketty, who wrote a book called Capital, echoing Marx's Capital, which was a bestseller a few years ago, has written a book, now saying that it's time for socialism. So, some political comment there, which is really interesting from somebody like Paul, saying normally I don't cleave to that sort of thing, but, it does need to be said. And, good on you, Paul, for coming out with that. So there's great musical moments and things in it as well, which is just superb because, melodically, Draper is so strong, he's got these great melodies and things. And of course, Dirty Tricks, again, comes up next, and it sort of underlines the ideas and Cult Leader Tactics, and it sort of points out very boldly and without any sort of shilly-shallying about that that this is something that people do in life. And he says be Machiavellian to win. If you know Machiavelli is, look him up. He was a Italian statesman who gave advice to princes, and it's he says all the stuff. And he said the chorus, all my life, that's all I ever knew. All my life I followed all the rules. Played dirty tricks, that's what you've got to do to get on in this life. And, sadly that can be true in so many things. We've all seen it in different things, in work we've done, in sort of all sorts of, roles in life. It does seem there's a lot of people out there like that. So that sort of underlines Cult Leader Tactics really well, I thought. And again, fantastic melodies and what have you. And then, of course, we have Cult Leader Tactics in E-flat minor. And, of course, straight away, I noticed, the melody of Strippervika there, and obviously other people did as well. And, again, this sort of shows you there's something else going on because, of course, when you listen to Attack of the Grey Lantern, which, of course, is the first Mansun album, though there is an argument that they recorded an album's worth of material on the EPs before Grey Lantern came out, and the way that Grey Lantern is referred to as being part of the Imperial period, and there's been comparisons saying that this is similar, probably because there's a few strings on it. It's as simple as that. If you want to call it Imperial, that's fine. I'd call it Eurocentric myself. Referring to the classical music tradition, where you instantly look at a string section as being classical. So, that's there. But, why are we seeing that? And again, we're seeing references back to things like Tax Loss, to that album, which of course was, in some ways, was an elaborate joke, because when you get to the hidden track at the end of the album on the CD, there's it's quite a long silence, it's a minute or two, and then you get the track which Paul sings. The lyrics aren't supposed to mean too much, they're just a vehicle for a lovely voice, and things getting weirder and weirder. And the whole narrative quasi concept of Attack the Grey Lantern, about a superhero who is disgusted by the sort of sexual morals of a certain place where there's this stripper vicar and his daughter Dark Mavis and all this sort of mythology, which is really entertaining. And for me, it's that sort of conceptual thing that's really strong in Draper's work, and what set Mansun apart from a lot of the bands who emerged in the 90s. The 90s for me was a period where it was great to see bands like Suede and Pulp, the Manic Street Preachers, doing such strong work. Mansun to me outstripped all of them because of this depth and these things which you could look at and pore over, and you keep discovering, aside from the richness of the music, which was always fantastic. So that was always there. And to me, when people say to me, why do you call Mansun the thinking man's Radiohead? Because I've always said this for many years, and it winds up Radiohead fans. But it's not that I dislike Radiohead. I think they're good, but I don't think they're as good as everybody says there. I think Mansun are far more important because they're subtle. People say, oh, well, Mansun, they just sound a bit like Oasis, blah blah blah. But it's not all about the surface, and that's the whole point. You've got to look at the detail. The devil is in the detail. And I said it because, of course, the music that Mansun produced and the songs, and even with Paul's work today, the sort of references to me, obviously, is Howard Devoto. I was a huge fan of Magazine from the very start, and I saw Magazine, I saw Devoto at Luxuria, and I think he's a really important artist. There was also the thing that Grey Lantern, the smoothness of it, the segues reminded me of classic Pink Floyd, and the way that in Cult Leader Tactics, the album, there's a willingness to be direct and to confront these things about Machiavellian behaviour. It's not sugar-coated, it's stark. And a lot of Pink Floyd stuff, if you look at an album like Dark Side of the Moon, which is about life in its big ways, you know, there is that similar thing where it's not sugar-coated, it's direct. So even though there are hidden things, there are very direct messages as well in the lyrics. And this is where Cult Leader Tactics, I think, is a step on from something like Grey Lantern, which is more arch. The other things that Grey Lantern reminded me of, and I am aware I'm talking about it a lot, but we'll come back to this, because I think the conceptual links are so strong, are the works of Brian Eno, the early days when he would just write these nonsense lyrics. Things like Egg-Shaped Fred, to me, seemed very like stuff of Eno's first couple of albums. And also Syd Barrett from the original Pink Floyd. You know, there seemed to be all these strange characters and things in Grey Lantern. So Grey Lantern, to me, connects to this a lot. So we've got the references to Stripper Vicar. We've got the Machiavellian thing of hiding the meaning of Grey Lantern in that hidden track. And then on this, you come, you know, referencing back to those things and, you know, making some comments. And there's more on that later. We'll come to that as we come on, because I want to do it one track at a time. And then, of course, you've got No Life Skills Baby as the next track out. And it's really good. And when I first heard it as a single, I thought, well, it's crammed with lyrics. It may be a bit repetitive, but it's a different type of songwriting. And, you know, it's obviously a narrative between a man and a woman. And the woman thinks maybe the man's a bit weak, what have you, and things like that. And, you know, it's an interesting thing because it seems a lot more direct than some of the things that Paul would write. But what interests me about this is that, is this a concept album? To a degree, yes. Does it really matter? Does that fit in with the concept? I guess we could argue some way it does. Maybe we need more listens. But the point really is this, is that most good concept albums have the odd thing that don't fit in. If you look at, say, some of the Bowie's albums, which are supposed to be concept albums like Ziggy Stardust, is the odd thing that doesn't fit in. The narrative that's supposedly behind lots of concept albums often isn't on the record itself. It's on liner notes or comes out in interviews later on. So I'm quite happy with the odd thing that doesn't quite fit, because it's the exception that proves the rule, and it makes for richness. So a quasi concept is fine. Diamond Dogs is a classic example, which was meant to be a musical version of 1984, but, you know, he couldn't get the rights from Sonia Orwell to do the stage show and what have you, so it didn't happen. So some of the songs don't relate to 1984 at all, like Diamond Dogs doesn't. Diamond Dogs relates to a Harlan Ellison story, in my opinion, and you know, there's other stuff on there which are not 1984 at all, and there are other things which are very much 1984. But, you know, you've got No Life Skills Baby doesn't seem to fit in with the Machiavellian stuff we've seen so far, because, of course, Johnson and Trump were Machiavellian on Internationale, like all politicians are. This about manipulation, dirty tricks about manipulation. So it's only when you get to No Life Skills Baby, you get to that. And the narrator, this sort of fights back and he says, you know, I do have life skills. So that's interesting. You Killed My Fish. Now, you know, this has been really popular with the fan base so far, but what is it about? Who knows? Obviously it's about fish, but is it? So it's really, really difficult to say, but it's surrealistic, it's strange. It kind of fits in with things like Egg-Shaped Fred and the sort of possible Eno influence I talked about. So, you know, it's there's a lot of empathy in there and what have you. So what does it symbolize? So answers on a postcard or in the comments below, please. I'd love to know what everybody else thinks. Does anybody have any interesting theories about You Killed My Fish and what it's about, you know? So, and then we get the old sort of like the sort of Depeche Mode moment, don't we? We sort of get everyone's a problem eventually. I'm just doing this to try and keep it visually interesting because I'm rabbiting on. But I think a lot of straight away thought Depeche Mode. My partner said straight away it's like Depeche Mode. And initially it was one of the tracks I enjoyed the most, but I must say I have found it a little bit melodically repetitive. And, you know, I do like the sentiment, you know, and again, it does fit in with the Cult Leader Tactics thing of, you know, everyone becomes a problem eventually. Everybody is disposable, you know, as the cult leader rises and achieves his aims, you know, he's quite happy to push people aside. So I think that does fit. But, you know, is Paul a fan of Depeche Mode? I don't know. You know, my initial thought was just this is a bit 80s. When my partner said I could see it, because I don't really like Depeche Mode, don't really my sort of thing. I like lots of 80s music because I was young and I was there, but I've always found them lyrically quite weak, I have to say, compared to a lot of other bands from that period, even some of the poppier ones. You know, I'm more of a sort of Japan and original Ultravox man myself. But yes, so it is interesting that there's this references in it, you know, to the pandemic as well. Obviously, it was written during lockdowns and what have you. And for example, there's the bit where he sings "Let's Dance." Do the social distance, stop, you know, which is quite good because, you know, you're sort of drawing back from things. And it is a bit like a dance, especially if you work with the public like I do, anybody's work, you know, in the public. And it's difficult for everybody, you know, whatever side they're on. We're used to being able to sort of be close to people and we can't. So that's sort of interesting, really. And, you know, in the pandemic, everybody became a problem eventually because we wanted them to stay away from us as we didn't want to catch C-19, you know, and obviously people still are, you know. My own favourite rock star, Dave Greenfield of the Stranglers, their keyboardist, my favourite musician of all time, he died of COVID-19 early in the pandemic. And, you know, it's had a huge impact on me. And, you know, it just shows, you know, how, you know, there's many meanings to a good song, you know, if you've got a good lyricist, and Paul's a great lyricist. And, you know, aside from being a great singer and a great musician as well, Annie is an interesting, it's very bold and direct. It's a lot more direct than you know, that I'm used to in a Mansun quasi love song, because of course we have things like you know, Manson's Only Love Song and what have you and things like that. And I know there was a period where Paul you know, said that he was changed at one point when he fell in love, and that seemed to come through in a sort of arch kind of way, in little kicks really. And Annie is supposedly, isn't it, the Manson song that was never finished. And you know, again, it's got a reference again to the pandemic in the last line: hands, face, space. You wash your hands more regularly. Don't touch your face if you haven't, and keep your space, your distance. So, you know, he's adapted that to this obsession with this woman, and I think that's quite interesting. I don't know about it really. I'm quite enjoying it, but it's maybe a bit too direct for me. But I'm maybe going to find something else beneath the surface. Talking behind my back, again, a classic Machiavellian technique, a dirty trick, you know, backstabbing, what have you. And that's there, you know, as well. So that fits in with the concept as well. But, you know, we get things like Amiga Man, and Amiga Man has got Steve Wilson on it singing along, which gives an interesting dynamic. And it's got that wonderful video of the dogs of Chernobyl, which is fantastic, isn't it? You know, and it's that thing. The great thing about Amiga Man is it's obviously about sort of like, you know, missing somebody and having lost somebody and what have you. But it's not shot through as despair. There's a kind of stoicism in there as well. And I've noticed in my job in the last 5 years or so that books about and by the Stoics, the original Greek philosophers who believed, you know, you should sort of like be stoical about things. You should show some sort of inner strength and, you know, and just endure, have been really popular, more so than any other time. I mean, I've been selling books for 38 years and I've never known the Stoics be popular, but they are popular recently and with young men. It's quite interesting. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor, all those people, how they have sort of come back as, you know, the philosophers for the young men of today. Very, very interesting indeed. I can't speak for women because I'm not one, and I'm not seeing the same trend, so I'm not sure. So maybe it's the alternative to popular feminism, I don't know. So, you know, we sort of close the album with Lying About Who You Sleep With, and again, you can see the dirty tricks thing about that. So there's certain things in here about love and relationships, like, you know, talking behind my back, and you've got no life skills, baby, everyone has a problem eventually, Lying About Who You Sleep With, so there is certain amount of traditional songwriting about sort of relationships between sort of romantic and sexual partners. That's there. But you've also got the sort of political stuff in International, and overall this sort of meditation on sort of life as a Machiavellian thing, on, you know, on the sort of manipulative elements that people do in their everyday lives that maybe we feel we have to do to get on and get through and what have you. So it's got a sad reflection on the human race, really. Musically, I think I don't think it's his strongest work. I like it. I think the music is mostly used as a vehicle for the songs. The album's quite short, which I do like, only 40 minutes. Obviously, an album by a solo artist is different to an album by a band. A band will have its own character, and there'll be 3, 4, 5, however many individuals putting their all into it. I always think a solo record is slightly different, and it's more sort of focused on that person's vision, even when they're the primary songwriter. I mean, you look at Dominic Chad. I mean, Chad, we miss Chad enormously. He's doing something else now. He seems to be happy doing it, and good for him. You know, it's not Mansun, it's Paul Draper. But we see there what Paul brought to the band. And to me, this is a mirroring reflection of, you know, some things back in the past. And of course, there's a reference to little kicks in here in that final track as well, isn't there? So I think so. I'm wondering what that's about. And that's going to be, you know, interesting. He says about how he wrote little kicks. And so I guess we'll find out. You tried to hack me to death for a crime I didn't commit, so I cooked up some tunes and that became little kicks. There we go. So that's a reference maybe to a relationship or what have you. But it's something for us all to pore over and obsess over, we fans of Paul and Mansun. I'd like to thank everybody on social media, and everybody's subscribed to my channel and watched the unboxing video and enjoyed it. And thanks to Paul for making a great record. As I've said, one of the few artists, you know, who's younger than me, who I've got any interest in at all, because he's got something to say and he says it well. So if you've enjoyed this, please subscribe, check out some of the other videos. I'm hoping to make some clips, in more real in-depth things about Grey Lantern and Six, even though Six I find so emotionally wearing to listen to because it's so strong and has particular meanings to me. That's a tough one. It's such an amazing record, both of them. And, you know, I love little kicks as well. And, you know, there's other videos by people like John Fox, The Stranglers, Hawkwind, David Bowie. There'll be more music to come. There's lots of books on the channel as well. It's interdisciplinary, so it's growing slowly, but lots of watch hours. So I would really appreciate your support. Hope you've enjoyed this. Let's play the album again and enjoy it. And for those of you getting to see Paul on the tour, I hope you enjoy. I don't do gigs anymore myself. I hope Paul enjoys them all. He's doing these great little record shop appearances. A fantastic thing to do. So this is Outlaw Bookseller with Cult Leader Tactics signing out for now. Bye.